Thank you for joining us for Construction Connections powered by Kurt. I'm Greg Sizemore, president of the Construction Users Roundtable, and we're delighted that you've tuned into this podcast today for what I am sure will be a very informative conversation. I'm going to introduce you to our guest speaker in just a moment, but before I do that, I want to tell you that the Construction Users Roundtable, commonly called Kurt, is an organization primarily for owners in the industrial and the commercial construction space. And it helps those members of our organization simply get more construction for the money. We have resources, perspectives, and experiences of each other that we share together. And today we are delighted to share some of those with you. I want to introduce to you all the way from the Philippines on the other side of the world, clearly 12 hours ahead of us, my good friend and industry subject matter expert, Mr. Bill Lewis. Bill's got over 45 years of combined project construction management experience. He's worked with companies such as Sabic, DuPont, and most recently, Microsoft, where he served as the director of project management for data center development. Bill has become truly a subject matter expert on modularization and pre-assembly, why it's important, how to use it, when to use it, what are the watch outs, and what are the pros and cons. And today we're going to explore some of those with him. So Bill, welcome to the show. We're glad that you've joined us and we're eager to get started.
Sounds good. Thank you, Greg.
You
Pleasure to
bet.
be
So
here.
the first question, Bill, I have for you is give us a little 30-second download on what exactly is modularization, or some call it pre-assembly, job site pre-assembly, and why does it matter?
Well, if you think about what modularization actually is, it's looking at a project or something that you're doing and trying to look at how to build that and optimize the build. If you think about early modularization, it was used in a lot of places that was remote where you couldn't get labor, it was hard to get to, you couldn't get material, and that drove some of the earlier modularization. But as we became better at it, it became more cost effective and competed with the traditional market. If you think about the traditional market today, traditional stick built construction, we're struggling, in a lot of different areas, and I think we'll talk about them a little bit more later, and which makes modularization a lot more appealing to project execution.
Yeah, of course. So it's not new, but how has its application in projects evolved over the last couple of years? And how do modern modular projects compare with those traditional stick-built methodologies?
Yeah, if you think about modularization, my first thought goes back to Henry Ford and the now assembly line process, the lean manufacturing process. Even these were small sections that they were bringing them all together, but to optimize the schedule and the cost effectiveness, they built these all in sections, pre-assemblies, brought them all together. And when we evolved during World War II in shipbuilding, when Henry Kaiser was tasked with building Liberty ships to support the war effort, when we were pulled into the war, obviously we weren't up to speed. We couldn't build Liberty ships as fast as they were being sunk. So he actually went to Henry Ford and talked to him about the modularization process. And they took that same strategy and applied it to shipbuilding, and was very, very successful turning out ships. If you think about, this was back in the 40s, they were using number 2 lead and sepia paper. Now, where we are today, we have, model design, we have laser scans for field construction, we have all these tools that are available. The technology has advanced significantly, and with that technology advances came a lot more opportunities for us and a lot more places where we can apply modularization.
Do you see modularization and its use increasing, decreasing, or staying about the same in the next year or two? And why?
I think we're going to see an increase. If you look at a lot of the projects that are out there, the schedules are getting more aggressive. Labor is getting more difficult to find. We have more challenges with procurement, and the old traditional stick building model just doesn't meet the need. Many projects, when I talk to a lot of owners and people in our network, they're behind schedule. They can't predict the schedule. Their budgets, are not predictable. So they have to figure out another method of doing it. The being able to get craft to staff the projects with that accelerated schedule. Now we got more people in a more congested area, and we need to get those people off site. Some of that work taken off site to relieve a lot of that congestion.
You feel that it also addresses some of the craft worker challenges? So many projects report shortages. How does modularization address the worker shortage throughout the United States, frankly?
Mhm. Well, and I'm going to think about from a productivity standpoint. If you look at the field, weather has a huge effect on construction projects, right? Uh, People traveling, we don't want to build projects where the sources are. We build them in remote areas, and people have to travel. So that makes it more difficult. We've not done a real good job of renewal in the last 10 or 15 years. So we're struggling, attracting new people into the industry. Now, if I go flip the other side and look at my modular fabrication shop, what I find is it's a climate control area. I control all the conditions. So if it's extremely hot, like something you may experience in Arizona, or if it's extremely cold, something that you may experience in the north central US in the wintertime, I don't have to deal with all that. I can keep my productivity moving. Uh, I standardize my work processes, so it's a safer environment. My
Right.
quality control's better, and what we find is the craft like working there. A lot of times, they'll bring their family to that area where the module shop is. They'll live there, raise their children, and they'll work, full time. It's steady employment for them in most cases. And I've actually ran into, some people in these module yards that have been in there for 30 years. You know, they're not going to go anywhere if the workflow stays. That they like it there. It's safe. It's continued work.
So I hear project managers, Bill, from time to time say, I feel sometimes like I'm managing two separate projects at once. Can you explain the parallel workflow and maybe how teams need to be um, adopting to
Yeah.
modularization?
Yeah, one thing about modularization is, you're going to start earlier and you are going to have two parallel workflow sites. If you think about it, in a lot of cases, all my site prep and my foundations and everything are going on while my modules are being fabricated in a facility. And,
Right.
uh, it's a little bit of a synchronization, about 40% through construction, depending on the type of project. These start merging back together. And when they do, it has to be very well synchronized. This is where things like AWP, comes into it, where my advanced work packaging, and I have all my planned, everything sequenced. Um, you know, so that's kind of where the early 40%, you probably basically have two projects going at the same time.
Interesting. What does it do to the project management team to use modularization? What special skill sets might be required to be on the team if you are indeed managing two projects at the same time? Any insight onto that, Bill?
Yeah, I think once you decide to do modularization, with a lot of companies, that's a cultural change. Your
Wow.
people have to be open to innovation and open to new ideas and understand the risks involved in both stick build and modularization, and where you're going to have challenges, where you're going to have to mitigate things. If you think a couple of things happen with a modular project, my design has to be a little bit earlier. Where I'm normally getting out my equipment specs, now that equipment spec is a module in a lot of cases. So I got to pull all that back. And the module is happening earlier. My fabrication is happening. The module is being built in a fab. So my procurement needs to be a little bit earlier. So I need to make sure now, if I'm going to send my equipment to a module yard to be put into a module versus the site. So when I went to the site, I had a little more flexibility, but I don't have that flexibility with the module yard. Remember, these are lean assembly line processes, and that assembly line keeps running. So the engineering needs to be a little bit earlier. Procurement needs to be a little earlier. And for an owner, the cash flow model changes. My cash flow curve moves to the left. I'm going to spend more money up front in getting this equipment, and my decisions, uh, you know, modularization is not as forgiving for late changes. So you
No,
need to
that's a
do
great
that.
segue. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry I interrupted you. That's a great segue into the next question. Explain to us what FEL1 means and walk us through the FEL1 stage, because obviously the financial piece is a part of it. What else is involved in FEL1 and why is it important to get that right?
Mhm. So I'm going to start with FEL0.
Okay.
This is feasibility. So the owner, I have a business case, I have a demand. I need to look at what my possibility is, what my options are. So I gather, I probably have about 2 to 5% project definition. And I want to look at it and see what the feasibility is of this project going forward. So that's where I have to my first gate. I look at the project. Is it a viable project? Yes. All right, let's move forward. Let's go into FEL1. Now, we do a lot of work in FEL0 looking at the project and all the variables that affect that project, but we don't have a lot of detail. When we go into FEL1, which is actual conceptual design, we start, gathering data and pulling it together and analyzing it. And there's certain things that we need to make sure that we understand that we're clear, that's going to give us, an outlook of the feasibility or going to the next step, going to FEL2.
So it sounds like a structured FEL1 phase will shape whether or not this modularization initiative is going to be successful or not. In what ways does investing in the FEL1 stage provide those long-term benefits that we allege that modularization brings?
Yeah. Well, when you do modularization, one of the key things that I see, I pulled everything back, so I get to market earlier. If I'm properly planned and executed, my NPV is going to be better because I'm going to get to market earlier. I'm going to sell my product. This is especially important for turnarounds or in a sold out market. And if you think about example data centers now, we can't get these data centers built fast enough and get to the market. It's important. They're extremely schedule aggressive, and modularization is going to help you on that critical path. It also brings, cost predictability. Uh, you have a lot better, you've controlled a lot more of the environment, so you have a better feel for what's going on. It does also require you in the FEL process to get a little more information, a little more details, so the probability of change later is not going to happen,
Just,
or it's
just
very limited.
very limited, right? Does the supply chain or interruptions in the supply chain affect modularization as impactfully as it would the stick build project, or are the risks about the same?
I think the risks are a little greater with the modularization project.
Really, I'm
You have
surprised.
to, yeah, for procurement, if there's long lead equipment, remember we talked about it is an assembly line process. And so when my project goes through, somebody else's project's right behind me. I
Yeah.
can't disrupt that assembly line. It's important that we do all the steps to make sure our procurement meets our schedule for the module fab shop. Now, you probably would have a little flexibility in some cases, depending on what it is. You may say, okay, we'll go ahead and build the module, and this can be installed in the field. But normally, you want to complete the whole module and ship it as a unit. And commission it too. That's another thing that you get in a module yard. You can pull a lot of that commissioning back. And when you think about, a lot of electronics and software and stuff, and just testing all your software for your process, I can do that up front, and I don't have to worry about failures of my circuits going down, or an issue that comes up with my software not being correct in the field.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. So there's so many products out there in the market that allege to help you do modularization, bigger, better, faster, cheaper. Talk to us about some of the softwares that you have found most reliable. And by the way, Kurt does not endorse one product or the other. Again, we share experiences, resources, and perspectives of our members. That's what we're doing here. But give us a little beeline on softwares and what we should be, I guess, looking for, asking about when we buy softwares to help us do modularization better.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to your 3D model. And
Okay.
like you say, there's lots of different types of software, but we want to be able to build that complete with all the details. And when we break the main or the main facility up into the modularization blocks, we want to be able to go to different integrators pretty much and let them develop that details and be able to pull that all back in. We also need to be able to take that information and sequence it and show that sequencing, that path of construction, so that everybody has a clear understanding of how this is all going to fit together. And, some things that support us with, the schedule, the AWP I mentioned is just a planning process. That's important to have everything sequenced correctly. And then when you get to the field, that also helps you with, your validation of your product in the field. You're progressing.
So leadership and experience, Bill, seem to be really essential to the success of the modularization initiative on projects. What do you feel owners should be looking for in a project leader for modularization pre-assembly usage on a project?
So they need to be looking for somebody that has knowledge and experience in the overall capital execution process. All right.
So
So
just basic good project management skill sets to begin with.
yeah, and they have to be somebody that's open to innovation and
Mhm.
understands how to work with people to, have a vision and a plan and enable them to do their work. It's probably not much different than project management, other than you're going to be managing more tools or more people and groups at the same time.
Interesting.
But
So
it's also important that they have some experience in a modularization strategy, going with the modularization strategy. I talked to a lot of owners and they said, well, we tried modularization and it didn't work. And I asked, what really went wrong? Well, they didn't do lessons learned. So they went in, they hired somebody and they said, oh, this looks simple, I can do it. But they didn't have any experience. Very smart people, but just didn't have that experience. And it's not something that you want to learn as you go. You want to bring in some SMEs that have done it and experienced and can tell you what to look out for and share their lessons. If I think about our sprint team, there's a lot of people on there that have been doing modularization for decades. They've
yeah.
had good experience and they had bad experience. And when you have a bad experience, you know, I, I can actually say I've never looked at a module project that went bad that it wasn't very easy to tell why. What steps did they skip? And it doesn't take very long to understand why a project goes bad. And
So
and
let's
then we also know all the steps that required to make it successful.
so let's talk about that sequencing a minute. Tell us about this modularization resource that the Construction Users Roundtable developed with your leadership. It's just outstanding. Can you give us some highlights of that modularization process, if you will, and
Yeah,
what
we,
the
we actually,
resource might contain? And by the way, for those of you that might not be aware, we're having a uh, modularization summit here in Cincinnati in September. In fact, that's going to be September the 17th, 16th, and 17th, right here, just moments away from the Greater Cincinnati Airport. And the title of it, and I'll take a minute here, Bill, and plug your event. The title of it is Owner Early Decision Processes for a Modularization Strategy. And it's going to be a terrific all day long workshop. And if you'd like to attend, whether or not you're a member of the Construction Users Roundtable, I would invite you to come to our website, go to our website rather, at curt.org. You'll learn more about it. Or you can call us here at the Curt office and ask for Rana, and she'll tell you exactly what you need to do to get registered. But back to the product that the Sprint team has created, Bill. Share with us what that does for someone that might not be that familiar with the modularization process, but desperately needs it and wants to master it. Share with us a little insight on that.
Okay, we actually have a well-rounded team of I think 26 people last count I remember,
Right.
and these are owners, these are AEs, EPCs, general contractors, fabricators, integrators, and we all in the beginning we sat down and we looked at modularization and talked about projects that we've done. What was the commonalities of these projects that went well, and what was the commonalities of these projects that didn't go so well. So we talked about that with the lessons learned concept, and we come up with 13 what we call essential variables. And we said, if we take these details and these 13 essential variables and drive them to the next level, or 30% is what we said, what would normally be a 30% review. We've taken and gathered more data and analyzed these further and looked for how they compared with good projects and bad projects, and what are the mitigation possibilities for these. So we had 13 essential variables that we're talking about, and we're going to take a deeper dive in that is critical to success for a modularization strategy.
Boy, that just sounds incredible, Bill. And I know you've worked and led this initiative like a crazy man. You've done so well, and we're so proud. And I want to take a moment also to thank you for your leadership, your passion, and for providing the novice with pathways to success when it comes to this very important concept of project delivery. What other resources might be out there that you keep your finger on the pulse of, Bill? Obviously, we've mentioned the Construction Users Roundtable and our Sprint team on mod and pre-assembly and this tool that you've just described. Are there other sources of information that you monitor in order to help you be a more well-informed decision maker?
Yeah, I try to read articles so I can try to understand things that people are doing, what new technology, what new ideas. A lot of that we get from the module yards and the integrators. When I go into there and I see the way we built modules 5 years ago and what they've done with automation and sequencing and the way they've laid their facilities out, that's another, or that's a big important step into how we're doing modularization. Then there's other committees I think that I engage in, and we get information from them, from other networks. The people that's on the team and just networking in CURT and other organizations and talking to people and sharing ideas and concepts and finding out, that's probably the biggest thing. And trying to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in our industry. And I know we look at modularization, but when I look at our industry, what's happening on these projects from a labor standpoint? Are they on schedule? Can they get labor? Where are they building this? Can you get people to go to Antarctica to build these, this facility? Those are just a lot of the things we'll continue to look at. What's happening in logistics with procurement? What's happening with transportation? Tariffs is another thing that we had. What's happening with economic development boards and communities?
Yeah, that's really important. For those of you who are listening or watching and may not be familiar with the Construction Users Roundtable, once again, I invite you to our website at curt.org, very simple, CURT.org, and you can find out not only resources available on modularization, but we have other resources and other SMEs as well. As we said earlier in the show, construction is hard, and we believe CURT is here to help. We're entering we're well into our 25th year of existence, and continue to be relevant to our member organizations and really trying to improve the industry overall. As we begin to wind this segment down, Bill, what's one piece of advice that you would offer to owners or contractors who are considering using this amazingly powerful tool for the first time?
So the first thing I would say is if I'm an owner, make sure you have somebody that is knowledgeable and experienced. And if you don't have anybody, you can hire a consultant to come in that's done this work before to help out and kind of tell you a little bit about the bumps in the road, what to expect, and how to mitigate them.
Bill mentioned earlier the need at times for subject matter experts or SMEs. And I will tell you that the Construction Users Roundtable and its alliance partner, the PRG Group, stands for Premier Resources Group, can help you with this should you need a resource to help you get this thing off the ground so that you can sail and soar. You know, ramp up and launch, as Bill mentioned, is often the most difficult part of any initiative and the most dangerous part when it comes to chances of failure. So I do encourage those of you who might need some help. Maybe it's a complex project. Maybe it's the first time you ventured into this area of project management. It's hard when we can help, not only with SMEs, but other resources. And I want to reiterate one more time our September event. Again, it's coming up in September, the 16th and the 17th. It's going to be at the Cincinnati Airport Marriott. It's entitled Owner Early Decision Processes for Modularization Strategy. You're invited. Kurt.org will give you more help, or you can call the number on the screen and call our Kurt office. Well, we've been talking to Bill Lewis, and as we mentioned, 45 years. Wow, what a career, Bill. 45 years of combined global project and construction execution experience from some of the world's largest companies, including Sabic and DuPont, and most recently, Microsoft. And Bill, I know that you've taken extra effort to join us today from the other side of the world, literally 12 hours ahead of us. And I want to thank you for your passion, your hard work, and all that you do to lead us to a better place, to improve the cost effectiveness of our business. So thank you very much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again for Construction Connections, powered by Kurt.